Mr. Jarrett, I have a couple of questions going back to your answers. One of the concerns that has been expressed by those who were supposed to be observing is that some were not allowed into the room, and I don't know what the protocol was for making a decision on who could and who couldn't be in the room. And then the other allegation is those that were allowed, they were kept so far away under the guise of COVID, they were kept so far away from the actual counting that it really wasn't an observation. So can you respond to that?
So yes, Mr. Chairman. So your first question about us not allowing individuals in the room, and that's not true. We had more observers involved in observing the election process than ever before. We had members from both parties through in every room, pretty much the entire process. And we worked with the parties. So we met with the parties in September, early September, to describe all the different opportunities that they would be allowed in which they could participate in observing through the selection process. So we had observers in every stage of the process at the vote centers, following our couriers when we're picking up ballots from the process, or picking up ballots from those vote centers or drop boxes. We had observers in the EV processing rooms. That's where we separate the ballots from the envelopes. In the we had 2 rooms where signature verification was occurring. We had observers from both parties in those rooms. And then we also had observers in our ballot tabulation center. So it is not accurate, or those rumors are not true that we were not allowing observers into the process. Now, under COVID-19, we asked that observers maintain 6 feet of physical distancing. This was to keep our staff members safe. Well, the observation process, so those observers could see the screens. Now, they may not have been able to see every screen in the room, but they can overhear conversations between managers and supervisors. They could view many of the screens in the rooms. They could also hear us making calls to hear signatures with voters. So observation is not just a visual process, it's also what they hear, what they see, interactions between staff members and supervisors. And they were able to observe all of those. But we did also allow observers to bring binoculars if they wanted to get even a closer up view of what was on those signature verification screens. And then one last thing I'd like to say is we've had many court hearings where observers have provided testimony that they were able to observe. In that testimony in court, that they were able to walk through the process. They could view any computer screen they wanted. They could view 20 computer screens in one sitting. So in testimony in court, observers have stated that they were able to observe the process.
Well, I understand that, but there are also a lot that have said they haven't been able to. And by your own testimony just now, you stated that they were able to observe some of the screens, but not all of the screens, but they could listen. Listening is fine, but if you don't see the actual underlying ballot, how do you confirm just because you hear 2 people speaking? I don't understand that conclusion.
So Mr. Chairman, they were able to get a very good sampling by the screens that they could view to see if there were any issues or concerns through that signature verification process.
Well, and I understand that. I think that's a faulty conclusion because when you're talking about anything that may be a misdeed or even less than fraud, just mistakes, if you can't verify all of the screens, if you can't verify all of the processes, then it leaves some doubt as to whether the validity of this process was uniform. Again, I'm not making any allegations of fraud, but I am suggesting that if the entire process could not be observed by somebody who's independent or representing a party, both parties, this is not just one party, but both parties, then I think we have at least a little bit of a flaw in the system.
So, and Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also discuss, we also went through a recent court hearing where a sampling of ballots was reviewed. And in that court hearing, the expert testimony from both parties said that the signatures that were reviewed through that process should identify, they did not identify a signature that would have resulted in a ballot not being counted. So even in a court hearing, the signature review process in Maricopa County, the evidence proved that we were doing our role and our job correctly.
with all due respect, as to that one particular provision. You've talked about all of the provisions that are in place, and so that testimony is referring to one particular provision of the process. Okay, please continue your presentation.
To that point,
Senator Michelle Ugenti-Rita.
thank you. Is it muted?
Nope.
Oh,
We
okay,
can hear
good. Oh, okay, excellent. Sorry, I can't tell. To Mr. Farnsworth's point, could you tell me where, either in statute or in the elections procedural manual, it outlines the authority to change the protocols for poll watchers? So in other words, I know you made some adjustments because of COVID-19. Did you have that discretion, or is it specifically outlined, or maybe there was an executive order that allowed for that discretion that didn't otherwise exist? Can you speak to that? And again, I'm just asking because I know that some adjustments were made because of COVID-19, and I wanted to understand the authority under which those adjustments were made.
Mr. Jarrett.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti-Rita, so I can take your question and research the exact provisions in the statute that speak to the observers in this process. But I will say, this is the first election that we had any political party observers want to look at signature verification, EV processing. Every election prior to this election, they did not even ask to be in the room. So we had more scrutiny over this election than any election in our history.